I'm going to tell a couple jokes. So good to be back here again. Everyone give a round of applause to Our Lady of Sorrows for the ministry, the good work they do. It's really tremendous what they do. I shouldn't be here. I should be at home on my couch eating donuts, getting fat. But you people, you look to the theologians for help. How dare you? Now, some of you are laughing because you know exactly where I got that from. But for those of you who don't, put it in your pockets. And next time you're on the YouTube, maybe you're running to a young lady named Greta Thunberg, and you'll hear a speech at the United Nations about climate change. And then you'll laugh. And then you'll realize that it's true that the person who laughs last appreciates it the most. But so I am David Gray. I'm happy to be here back here, Our Lady of Sorrows Ministry. Early this year when I was here, I talked a lot about Freemasonry, its dangers, why Catholics shouldn't be Freemasons. I talked about my conversion to the Catholic Church. And I'm going to touch on a lot of that briefly here this afternoon, but mainly what I'm going to talk about is in union with the conference is that the cost of not speaking the truth, the cost of speaking the truth as well. And in regards to Freemasonry, there's a price that we pay in not telling the truth about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. The Masonic order of Freemasons, men who are involved in the Masonic order, women who are involved in the Order of Eastern Stars, boys and girls who are involved in the order of Demole and Job's daughters. It's destroying families, it's harming the church, and we need to speak more boldly, consistently, and truthfully about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons, why Catholics cannot belong to the Masonic order. And altogether, why people altogether, Christians or non-Christians, should not be involved in this Masonic order because there is a price to pay. How many of you know someone who is a Freemason or who is a Catholic, who is a Freemason, or Order of Eastern Star, or any boys and girls who belong to Order of Demole and Job's daughters? So it looks like a number of you. So let's start off, before I get into that, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a quick primer about what Freemasonry is. What Freemasonry is structure, some of its rights. For those who don't know a whole lot about Freemasonry, have heard some things, but some of you may have heard a lot of rumors and myths and conspiracy stories and things like that. I'm not going to talk a lot about the conspiracies. That's not why a person can be a Freemason. I'm going to talk about exactly what Pope Clement XII said in 1738, why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. It has nothing to do with all the conspiracies and things you heard. So we're just going to stick with the orthodoxy of faith and the dogma, okay? But let's just start with a quick primer. Talk about what Freemasonry is and what it's not. Number one, Freemasonry is stupid. Oh no, that's the talk I give 8th graders. Isn't it funny, 8th graders kind of get things? Do we have any school teachers here? Any school teachers? Kids really get things, don't they? You don't have to use a whole lot of words. I don't need all these pages. I'm talking to kids about Freemasonry. I say, Freemasonry is stupid. They say, oh yeah, I get it, Mr. Gray, it's stupid, so I shouldn't belong. No.
That's all I need.
I remember when I was a substitute teacher in Catholic schools, I walked into my first 8th grade class, and as soon as I walked in, one of the kids said, look at that man with those shoes. And he just started laughing, and the whole class started laughing. But kids get it. You don't need a whole lot of words. But Freemasonry, number one, Freemasonry holds, that is, in its founding document, it's called Anderson's Constitution. It's from 1723. And in this Anderson's Constitution, it says 2 times that Freemasonry is a universal religion. A universal religion. That's what it calls itself. Now, Freemasons will deny this over and over again, and they'll nuance, they'll try to play acrobats with Anderson's Constitution, say, no, it's really saying this. But no, twice it says, Anderson's Constitution. You can go on the Google and look it up. It says Freemasonry is a religion. They call it the Universal Brotherhood. They call it the center of union for all men. So what Freemasonry is saying that it is the highest good for men. That's the center of union. That what Freemasonry, what you bring to Freemasonry, it says your creeds, your religions, all those things are subordinate to what Freemasonry calls the universal religions, as high as good, as high as truth. So it's syncretic in that sense. It's taking people from different religions and bringing them in and saying that they're uniting all men under this one idea. Okay. So it says itself in this own constitution, this founding document, Anderson's Constitution, that Freemasonry is religion. It is the highest good. And really what that is indifferentism, which is a heresy. Number two, as a philosophy, Freemasonry makes war with what the Catholic Church teaches. For Catholics, we believe that Jesus is who he said he is. He's the way, the life, and the truth. To suggest contrary to that is to deny Christ and his church and his sacraments. But Freemasonry is saying that there is another way, another life, and another truth. That it is not through Christ's sacrifice and his grace that we live our best life and arrive at that better place, arrive in eternal life with him after death. No, Freemasonry that teaches that if you just apply the working tools of Freemasonry, such as some of you seen the Masonic symbols, the square, the compass with the letter G in the middle. Let's break that down for a second. Freemasons would say if you take that square and an operative Mason, they would say, when they use that square to square work, right? To measure it, to make it square, make a stone so that it can fit evenly into a building. Well, Freemasons saying the word Freemason means free from masonry, operative masonry. So Freemasons are saying that we're free from the working tools, but we're applying those same working tools in a speculative sense, in a philosophical sense. So they'll say, well, I'll take that same square and I'll apply it to my life. I'll square my life. I'll make myself a fitting stone that can fit into a building. The compass on top of the square, they'll say, well, operative Mason, they use that compass to lay dimensions. You know, a compass is like this. You know, if you twirl it around in sand, then it'll make a circle. Well, operative Mason is saying, well, that circumcision, that area by which the compass makes, are my boundaries in my life, that I can't go outside of those boundaries. They'll take something like a 24-inch gauge. And they say, well, operative Masons, they use that gauge to lay and measure their work. But me as a Freemason, I would use that gauge to measure my life. So I divide that 24-inch gauge into 3 equal parts, where I would see 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for labor, and 8 hours for work. So you see how the philosophy works. They take the tools of Freemasonry, they apply it to their lives. Now, this is the problem. It sounds good in a sense. It sounds like a cool philosophy. But the problem when it comes to Christians, particularly Catholics, is that we don't believe that we can make ourselves better. We believe that we need God and his grace. We need the sacraments to arrive at that place beyond death with our eternal Father in heaven. That this is Pelagianism in its highest sense, this self-determination. We don't believe that. We don't believe that we can make ourselves better. We believe that we need Christ because he is the way, the life, and the truth. So that's number 2, the philosophy of Freemasonry. Number 3, outline the system itself, Freemasonry. Because there's Freemasonry and there's the Masonic order. Craft Freemasonry, craft, C-R-A-F-T, like craftsman. Craft Freemasonry really consists of really just a couple things. It consists of the lodge, the Masonic lodge that you probably see here and there. It consists of also what is called, in the York Rite, it consists of the Royal Arch Chapter and the Royal Select Master Chapter. Those are called cryptic degrees and Royal Arch degrees. And also, Freemasonry could also be consist of the first 3 degrees of the Scottish Rite. And you've heard of the Scottish Rite, the 32 degrees, 33 degrees. That's properly craft Freemasonry. By craft Freemasonry, what we mean is, again, those working tools, Masons building things. And it also, craft Freemasonry relies upon this myth of a gentleman named Hiram Abiff, who was supposedly at the building of King Solomon's temple. The story goes that Hiram Abiff, Hiram, King of Tyre, and King Solomon They're all involved in building King Solomon's temple, but also these three men had together, they knew the secret name of God. It was broken down into 3 syllables. King Solomon knew a syllable, Hiram, king of Tyre, knew a syllable, and Hiram Biff had another syllable, so 3 syllables. Now there are 3 guys who wanted the secret name of God. Freemasons would call them the 3 Jews. There's Jubilo, Jubilah, Jubilum. They accosted King Solomon, and each of them tried to steal from him the secret name of God, but he would never give it up. So the last Jew killed him. Now this sounds like a story you may have heard in the Bible about Jews killing someone who knew the name of God. You wouldn't be far off. So after his death, King Solomon comes around and he sees Hiram slain, and he tries to raise him from the dead, and he cannot. He tries to do it 3 times. And since the name of God was lost now, King Solomon, he establishes a substitute name of God. And so this is what Freemasons now know. They say they believe, they know they don't have the real name of God anymore. They have the substitute of it. And this is how you get in and out of lodge meetings, by pronouncing this name, substitute name of God. And so this is why Freemasons also call themselves widow's sons, and they call themselves travelers, traveling from west to east in search of this name of God. They're traveling. So that's just a quick primer, quick 3 points about what Freemasonry is. We'll have a little bit of time left at the end if we have any questions about that. Now, a little bit about me before I begin. Like you heard, I was a Catholic convert to the Catholic Church in 2006 by the way of Gnosticism and Deism. To the point, at one point in my life, I thought life wasn't worth living anymore. And I tried to commit suicide by asphyxiation. And asphyxiation is suffocating yourself. So I put a plastic bag over my head and a rope around my neck. I don't know if it would actually have worked, but I thought it would, so I tried. But while I'm in the process of trying to suffocate myself, I'm on about the 2nd and a half turn, and I hear a voice. Clear as it was an audible voice. It was a voice from without, not within, it was without. And the voice said, "I love you. I am here." And, when you hear a voice, you kind of see where did that voice come from. All right, so I looked around, no one was there. And as soon as I asked the question in my head, who was that? I just knew it was Jesus, somehow, some way. And this is weird because Jesus was fiction to me. I didn't believe he was real. I thought he was made up. And I used to tell everyone that you can't prove that Jesus is real. He's just an imaginary character that people made up to control people. I was that guy. So it was weird that, okay, even if he is real, why would he tell me that he loved me and he was there for me? Because for quite a long time, I was persecuting Christians, especially as a Freemason. I was what was called a district deputy, which was a representative of the Grand Master. My area that I was in charge of was all of Western Ohio. And I would go into these lodges and I would tell these Freemasons that when I come to your lodge to inspect it, I do not want to hear any prayers ending in the name of Jesus. I do not want to hear any church songs. I was just, again, reinforcing Anderson's Constitution, which says that Freemasonry is supposed to be non-secular. But sometimes you do have Freemasons who apply these Christian odors to Freemasonry to make it more palatable to Freemasonry. But I didn't want to hear the name of Jesus because it made me cringe. It offended me. It made my skin crawl. Yet at that moment, on my bed, pulling the rope off my neck, the bag off my head, I cannot deny from that day forward that Jesus is real and that he is interested in my life. So I decided to follow him. That's what you do when somebody saves your life, right? You kind of follow him. Like, somebody pushes you out of the way of a moving car. You want to thank him. Thank you. Where are you going? Can I buy you dinner? That type of thing. So I follow Jesus, and I follow him all the way to his church. And so that's how I did it. So since then, I went on to sometime later. My wife at that time, we were both married. We were both agnostics, deists sometimes. But when she found out I was becoming Catholic, she decided she'd divorce me. She didn't think that would work. I didn't know what I was going to do for a while. I thought about seminary. I started down that path and stuff, so I started working on my master's degree. So that's how I ended up at Franciscan University of Steubenville, preparing myself to enter seminary. And then I finished my master's degree at Master of Arts degree in theology at Ohio Dominican University. I went on to teach Catholic theology in grade schools for a little while. Always been active in my parish as a catechist or teaching adults. My two daughters, I have three daughters from my first wife. Two of them became Catholic. They followed me into the church. One, she's still in school. She started RCA last year, but she didn't finish. Pray for her because she thinks she has time. I said, "Oh, Dad, I'll do it later." So keep her in her prayers. But my new wife, Felicia, she also, and her daughter, my stepdaughter, they also became Catholic. So that's what the church has done for my household so far. And what I sense God has called me to do is really just teach the real meaning and mystery of the Mass, the liturgy. And so that's the work I've been primarily involved with. And like was said, I started St. Dominic's Media to promote that work, and we've put out a few books so far about the Catholic Mass and history. And so that's what I'm doing, doing podcasts about this. I really believe that what the mystery, what the Mass can do for us is that it wants us to be outside the church, who we were prepared to be through the liturgy. That it wants us to be in the world what we have received through the Mass. It wants us to be who in the world, who we have received in the Mass, to be Christ in the world. And that's what I really believe the Mass is doing. And so that's the primary work that I'm involved with today. If you're interested in more about that, I think there's some books in the library. The Divine Symphony, a book that I wrote, The Divine Symphony, that talks more about, what that book does is it uses an analogy of a symphony orchestra. It's 4 movements. And I explain how those 4 movements of the Mass, of the symphony, you can see those through the Mass. And it's a lot of great composers, Mozart, Haydn, these people were Catholics, and they were influenced by the Mass. And you can see that in their music, especially Mozart's 45th. And so, if you're more interested in that, check out that book. But before all that, I spent a decade being very active in Freemasonry. I was raised, so to speak, as Freemasons say, I was raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. Again, that idea of being raised goes back to Hiram Abiff being raised by King Solomon. Again, more allusions to Christianity. And this is back when I was a sophomore in college, back in 1994. But by 2004, I had been made by that time, very active in Freemasonry for 10 years. I had been made the worshipful master of a lodge, as the head of a lodge. I was the youngest at that time in Ohio. Like I said, I've been appointed the district deputy. I have written numerous books on Freemasonry and Masonic history. I had spoken in several parts of the world about Freemasonry. I had become this authority on Freemasonry. I started, co-founded what's called the Dr. Charles H. Wesley Masonic Research Society as first editor. Have been given a lot of awards. I was the first Prince Hall Freemason. Prince Hall Freemasonry is a predominantly black set of Freemasonry, or black men. But I became the first Prince Hall Mason to also belong to a predominantly white Grand Lodge in Ohio as well. Year after I became a Master Mason, I received the 32nd degree. And back then, it only took like 2 months. It's not a big deal. People who aren't Freemasons, they think that's a big deal. Oh, he's a 32nd or 33rd. For Freemasons, it's not really a big deal. It just means you have money to be initiated. That's all. And so there's 33 degrees in the Scottish Rite. But the 33rd degree, for some Freemasons, they think that's a big deal. If you're not an honorary 33rd, it's not a big deal. It just means you have $5,000 to give someone. But to be an active 33rd, that is more of a big deal. There's not a whole lot of them. So it's more like who you know. But also, like I said, I went up the other Rite, the Scottish Rite. I also went up the York Rite. Like I said, the Red House, the Royal Arch, the Purple House, the Cryptic Degrees, and then the Knights Templar, the top of that house as well. Held elected offices in several of them, member of the Eastern Stars. So a lot of experience in Freemasonry, both locally and globally, as elected officer and just a local officer. So I'm happy to say that my passion in that, when I was doing that was just in writing and research. And I was happy that God was able to use my gifts of writing now for talk about the truth and not mislead people. All right, so let's talk about the cost of not speaking the truth about Freemasonry. There are countless numbers of Catholics who belong to the Masonic order throughout the world. No one has, of course, the church doesn't go around and poll their members. You belong to Freemasonry. We don't take numbers, right? and Freemasons, they don't care. So we don't know exact number of how many Catholics are Freemasons or belong to the Masonic order. But just empirical data, just from experience and talking to people, I would say globally, of around 15 million Masons globally, I would say anywhere from 10 to 20% of them are Catholics. So let's begin this talk in nomine Patris et Filio et Spiritus Sanctus. After slavery had been abolished in the United States in 1865, Rome made two attempts to try to convince American Catholics to evangelize to Black Americans and Black Catholics, to support the Black Catholic communities. The first attempt at this was at the Second Plenary Council in Baltimore in 1865. Rome had fully endorsed creating an apostolate to be directed towards American Blacks. They even named a guy named Bishop Spalding to be the head of the council, and he was the main one behind this push for the Catholic Church. Now that slavery is over, there wasn't any obstacles. Let's evangelize to Black Americans. But he received no support whatsoever at the council. In fact, many bishops were quite upset at Rome for even pushing this idea upon them. So then in 1904, while the Catholic Church in America was still subject to the Council of Congregation of Propagation, they would try again to convince American Catholics to do something about Black Americans who weren't being evangelized into the church. Rome had heard about the condition of Black Catholics in a booklet entitled The Miserable Condition of Black Catholics in America. It was written by a gentleman by the name of, priest by the name of Joseph Ossio. He belonged to the Society of St. Joseph, which is the Josephites. And he wrote about the injustices and evils of the Jim Crow laws, the lynchings, the mob justice against Blacks, the segregation, the fear that Catholic priests have to help Blacks because they fear their congregants. The prejudice against Black priests, the segregation that occurs in Catholic churches during Mass, Blacks not allowed to receive communion in the same line as whites, not allowed to drink out of the same cup. Segregation in Catholic, Blacks not being admitted to Catholic schools and colleges and universities. Georgetown University is one example, which is ironic that Georgetown wouldn't admit Blacks until the mid-1900s, being that they sold 272 of their own slaves to help fund that school. But Ossio did make some exceptions for a few bishops who were bold, who did have a backbone, who did stand up, who did try to help and evangelize. But then there are other bishops like Kelly of Savannah, Georgia, who publicly criticized President Theodore Roosevelt for inviting Booker T. Washington to the White House for dinner. Booker T. Washington, he was a founder of Tuskegee University in Alabama. There's also the bishop he's also the same bishop who stated that no Black man should ever be ordained because Blacks are irregular according to canon law, because they are held in contempt by whites. Now, Rome's ongoing interest in this issue did result in the establishment of what they call the Catholic Board of Negro Missions with Reverend John E. Burke, priest out of New York. And Burke did a lot of tremendous work for this issue, on this issue. He wrote a really good paper. And in regards to what we're talking about today, one of the reasons that Burke said one of the problems in evangelizing Blacks in America to the Catholic Church was that he found that too many Black Americans belonged to secret societies like Freemasons, which is true then as it is today. And Burke found that to be a barrier, rightly so, that Black Catholics were not able to become Freemasons from the Catholics because they belonged to Freemasons. But Burke said this, which is weird. he said that black Catholics, the ban against such membership should be maintained for black Catholics. But he says, but permission should be obtained from the Holy See, allowing prospective converts to retain their membership in such societies for the sake of financial benefit. Burke noted that secret societies, black secret societies, did not present the same threat to Catholics as white societies did. He also urged that the church should create a society with similar financial benefits for black Catholics. And not long after, in 1909, such a group was founded called the Knights of St. Peter Claver. And Burke was correct in stating, like groups such as Prince Hall Freemasons in the black community, they did cover the cost of burying their members, they did take care of their widows, they did provide financial support. But Burke was in great error, in great ignorance here. There was no distinction between in the Masonic principles, which I laid forth today, in between whether it's an Asian Freemason or an Indian one or a white one or a black one. Freemasonry is Freemasonry. And so he was in error there to say that, well, it's not the same. Now, to be certain, on April 28th, 1738, the papal bull called In Enmity, that is, on Freemasonry, was written by Pope Clement XII, which he forbid Catholics from being Freemasons. He made no exceptions whatsoever about the color of people or what region they were in. He simply laid forth 3 reasons why Catholics cannot be Freemasons, why Catholics are forbidden from being Freemasons. The first one is this: Freemasonry is an error, a vice, and a danger, and it creates a disturbance in the Catholic Church. Being such, the Orthodox religion needs to be kept free from, lest it, Freemasonry, breaks into the household of God like thieves and like foxes seeking to destroy the vineyard. That's number 1. Number 2, he says that Freemasonry caters towards, relies on, and was established by natural probity. That is, relies on, caters towards, and was established by indifferentism, and has its own law. So Freemasons have their own moral law that is a little bit different than God's law. Okay, so Freemasons have standards, things you can't do. If you do, you get kicked out. They have their own law. They have their own revelation. And he says it obligates men by an oath on the Bible and by a host of grievous punishments and silence about what they do in secret together. Number 3, Pope Clement XII said, being that Masonic meetings take place in secrecy, they lack transparency. They cause rumor, and the faithful have great suspicions about it. Number 4, societies like these disturb the peace of the temporal states and the well-being of souls. The ban in enmity that we just read, these 4 points, they were reiterated by numerous popes thereafter, which sort of qualifies this in a way some would argue as a dogmatic teaching of the church, because it was repeated and repeated and repeated by several popes. Benedict the 14th in 1751, Pius VIII in 1821, Leo the 12th in 1825, Pius VIII in 1829, Gregory, my Roman numerals, Gregory the 16th in 1832, and Pius X in 46, 49, 64, 65, 69, and 73. Over and over again, Catholics are told that it can't be Freemasons. Yet here was Burke in 1904 attempting to introduce what we would call today as some sort of synodal Amazonian ideology, that there can be dispensations granted to people in these areas over here not to be really Catholic because the faith is too hard, right? So let's water it down. These people are too ignorant, they're too backwoods to really accept the true Catholic faith. The cost of Burke's lie was that still today, the Black Catholic Church community, especially in Chicago, Maryland, there are a tremendous amount of Black Catholics who belong to Masonic order. I remember not long ago, well, I guess it was long ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was invited to do a talk about Freemasonry in the diocese in Chicago. The talk was supposed to be in 2 parts. And so the first part, I just laid it out. And I wasn't invited back to do a second part of this talk. So Chicago is just one of those places where you have a lot of Catholics who are Freemasons. And so I was not allowed to come back. The cost of speaking the truth when it's inconvenient. The Amazonian ideology. If that's too many syllables for you, let's just call it indifferentism. It's a heresy that's already been condemned. But this ideology posits that for the sake of utilitarianism and for expediency, we should just water down the faith. But that is because it is far more beneficial to the faithful than being rigid with the dogma and holding fast to scripture and tradition. Yet despite the fact that the 1917 Code of Canon Law forbids Catholics explicitly from becoming members of the Masonic Order. In 1966, after a 4-year investigation, 5 Scandinavian Bishop Conferences, the Scandinavian Bishop Conferences represent 5 different countries. And so they investigated Freemasonry for 4 years. And they came back, this is 1966, that was after Vatican II. After Vatican II, people were thinking like, oh, everything has changed. What was true is no longer true. The post-conciliar norms, the Bishop Conference looked at in Episcoparium Numerous. That document stated that it empowered bishops in special cases to dispense from certain injunctions of canon law permitted within his diocese. This conference said that in this diocese, converts to Catholicism, they can retain their membership in the Swedish Rite. That is the Masonic Rite in Sweden. But only with the specific permission of that person's bishop. Then in 1968, 2 years later, the Tablet, which is a well-read Catholic International weekly review that's published in London, they reported that the Vatican sources had been quoted. Okay, these sources, right? These mystical sources. They've been quoted as saying that Catholics are now free to join the Masons in the United States, Britain, and most other countries in the world. However, the European Grand Orient Grand Lodge of Masons, established by primarily Italy and France, they were still considered to be anti-Catholic. Little distinction here. So you have what's called regular Freemasons. These are Freemasons that descend from the mother Grand Lodges of England and Scotland and Ireland. They're called regular, if you can trace your origin back to them. This is that sacramental character, sort of like apostolic succession. Freemasons supposedly practice this. If you descend from this Grand Lodge, you're regular. And you also have to practice Freemasonry according to Anderson's Constitution. If you deviate from that, you're what's called an irregular Freemason or Grand Lodge. These would be groups like Women Freemasons, lodges that have women and men Freemasons, and lodges like the Grand Orient of France and Italy, which you can join and you can be an atheist. These are lodges that you've heard about over centuries, lodges like the Grand Orient of France. They were involved in starting the French Revolution. They're very political. But the Scandinavian bishops and Tablet here, again, are in error. Nothing had changed about Freemasonry. Their principles didn't change. They didn't no longer stop practicing indifferentism, but now these sources and these Scandinavian bishops are saying that Catholics can be Freemasons. And they also said, these sources were saying that the CDF, they were letting it be known that Catholics joining the Freemasons are no longer excommunicated automatically. This new post-Vatican II idea of reimagining the Catholic Church, of how we live in our faith, also affect what the church had always taught about Freemasonry, and will continue throughout the 1970s and the early 1980s. And what we thought was a ban in 1917 that Freemasons can be Catholics clearly said in 1917, the Code of Canon Law, that persons joining the Masonic sect and others of the same kind which plot against the church and legitimate civil authorities contract excommunication simply reserved to the Apostolic See. Again, the Code of Canon Law in 1717. Persons joining associations of the Masonic sect or any others of the same kind which plot against the church and legitimate civil authorities contract excommunication. That is late sentia, automatically. That is reserved to the Apostolic See. Now that was now being reinterpreted and reimagined by these local ordinaries. That they were saying that now we get to determine whether these Masonic sects in our dioceses are actually those kind that plot against the Catholic Church. This is a clear departure from the 1738 papal bull Indemnity by Pope Clement, and the one that was repeated and repeated and repeated by Pope after Pope after Pope. In 1980, after 6 years of dialogue with representatives from the United Grand Lodge of Germany, their investigations of Masonic rituals. Now, this is really good coming out of Germany. This is from the German bishops. Sometimes we don't get a lot of good stuff out of Germany, but this is one right here. They investigated Freemasonry in 1980, and they found that, number one, Freemasonry denies revelation and objective truth. Freemasonry denies revelation and objective truth. That's true. Number two, Freemasonry, religious indifference is fundamental to Freemasonry. Number three, Freemasonry is deist. Number four, Freemasonry denies the possibility of divine revelation. Number five, Freemasonry threatens the respect due to the church's teaching office. Number six, the sacramental character of Masonic rituals signify individual transformation. That's true, like we laid forth. If you just follow this working tool, you can become a better person. Number seven, Freemasonry offers an alternative path to perfection. True, as we said. Number eight, Freemasonry has total claim on the life of the member. That's a problem. Number nine, all Masonic lodges are forbidden to Catholics, including so-called Catholic-friendly lodges. These would be lodges like the one that Mozart belonged to in Austria, or Prince Hall Freemasons in the United States. Again, some lodges and Grand Lodges, they do have this Christian odor, right? They try to be attractive to Christians. So Germany was on record for rejecting Freemasonry in all of its forms, but elsewhere there was confusion afoot by the time we arrived in the 1980s. Catholics were joining the Masonic order in large numbers. And in 1983, when the Code of Catholic Law was published, it removed the name Masonic. It removed the word Masonic and removed the penalty of excommunication. It now said a person who joins the Masonic Association or plots against the church is to be punished with a just penalty. And one who promotes or take office in such an association is to be punished with an interdict. It was just another blow to what was once thought to be a clear dogmatic teaching. And so this, again, was an incentive for Catholics to say, well, the church has changed. I can join the Masonic order now. So in 1883, Joseph Ratzinger, who was then the head of the Congregation of Doctrine of Faith, he attempted to clarify the church's continued posture against Freemasonry in a declaration on the Masonic associations. In this document, he said, it has been asked whether there has been any change in the church's decision in regard to Masonic associations, since the new Code of Canon Law does not mention them expressly, unlike the previous code. This sacred congregation is in a position to reply to this circumstance is due to an editorial criterion which was followed. Also in the case of other associations likewise unmentioned, inasmuch as they are contained in the wider categories. Therefore, the church's negative judgment in regards to Masonic associations remains unchanged, since their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden. The faithful who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion. It is not within, get this part, this is important. It is not within the competence of local ecclesiastical authorities to give a judgment on the nature of Masonic associations, which would imply a deviation from what has been decided above. And this is in line with the Declaration of Sacred Congregation. So, yet despite that, in 2000, this is another interesting story, in year 2000, David Patterson, who was executive secretary of the Masonic Association in Los Angeles, he asked Cardinal Roger Cardinal Mahoney whether practicing Catholics may join a Masonic lodge. Father Thomas Anslow, who's the judicial vicar of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles, replied to Patterson that the matter is just far too complex for a straightforward yes or no. But at least for Catholics in the United States, I believe the answer is probably yes. When it comes to a dogmatic teaching, we don't preface things with probably, right? Imagine someone asking the church's teaching office, was Jesus raised on the third day? Probably. For Catholics in America, again, this is more that Amazonian synodal ideology, that we can have different rules for different people in different places. Is your son a boy or a girl? He's probably a girl. I don't know. Now, a couple years later, Anslow would retract that statement, but the damage was done. The seed of confusion was planted. You know, I hear from Catholics who are Freemasons on a weekly, daily basis. Some have watched my videos on Freemasonry, or they read something I've written on Freemasonry. A very number are, a small number, just thankful to me. They say, oh, I didn't know that. That's good information. I'm going to leave Freemasonry. But most of them are people who are in denial about it. The conversation usually goes like this. David, who told you that Catholics can be Freemasons? I send them links to the Vatican website, and I send them links to other things. Oh, that's not true. My local ordinary gets to decide whether I can be a Freemason or not. Again, I send them links and articles, and I tell them the truth. Then they block me, right, on Facebook. And I never hear from them again, right? So that's how that works out. I guess if I was a coward, I could just say, well, probably. You probably should leave Freemasonry. You probably shouldn't receive the Holy Eucharist. But more than from hearing from men who are Freemasons, I oftentimes hear from women who are married to a Freemason. A lot of them are Catholic, a lot of them aren't Catholic. And they email me, you'd be surprised. This is almost a couple times a month. A woman will email me or message me on Facebook, and then she would ask me, is my husband cheating because he's a Freemason? And I have to tell them, well, there's no grand right of adultery. That's not a degree. But it is true that infidelity to God does lead to infidelity in other places. Recently, I heard from a lady, she's in Ireland, and she's in love with this guy who wants to move. He's in South America. He wants to move to Ireland to be with her. They're in love. And isn't love a great reason to get married? Isn't that cute, right? I think there's more practical reasons. You know, my wife told me she married me because she thought I'd be a good father and a good husband. I think that's a good reason, right? But love, that's cute. That's cute. So they're in love. And I told this girl that, you know, you marry who you marry. You know, she said, well, maybe I can pray and maybe he'll stop being a Freemason. But you marry who you marry. And I told her that. And I told her she can't let the spirits, these demonic spirits, into her marriage. And she has to draw the line if she's a Catholic. Oftentimes, almost always, I tell these women that from the foundations of the earth, that God knew you were going to be in this position. And that your husband's soul is on the line. You can pray, you can fast, but your family, the health of your family, spiritual health of your family is in danger. And I always tell these women that if you pick a fast day, I'll fast with you. Let's fast for your husband. Let's pray and fast together to bring him out of Freemasonry. I never hear back with a fast day. Perhaps that's too hard. but I have heard success stories as well. So there are a lot of Catholics who are involved in Freemasonry. And we need to share the truth of why the church teaches that Freemasonry is a contradiction to living the best life that Christ Jesus has given us. Jesus is the way, the life, and the truth. Freemasonry is not. Both of these paths cannot lead to the same destination. Both of these ideas cannot be true. Either what the Catholic Church teaches is true, or what Freemasonry teaches is true. They both cannot be true. But we, in the Catholic Church, we have the evidence. We have the saints. We know that our path does lead to heaven. The reason why Catholics cannot be Freemasons is not because of all conspiracies and gunpowder plots, as sexy and as intriguing as they may be. The simple teaching of the church is that by her wisdom and her authority, she teaches that it is harmful to you and to your soul and to your family to follow any other path than the one that was established by Christ Jesus through his church. You can do more. You can do more. You can do no more. You can no more be a Catholic and a member of the Masonic order than you be a Catholic and a Mormon. You can no more be a Catholic and a Muslim, be a Catholic and a Jehovah's Witness. You can't be a Catholic and a New England Patriots fan. Wait. Okay, hold on. But you can't be a Catholic and a member of the board of directors at Planned Parenthood, right? These things contradict one another. These things contradict and inveigh against what the church teaches. The simple question I would like you, if you have someone in your life or you know someone that you have this relationship with, you have this conversation, I ask you to pose to them the simple question: is Jesus not enough for you? Because a lot of these men, a lot of these women, they join these Masonic orders, and it is hard to leave because they give you these degrees, they give you these fancy titles, they fill you with this sense of importance and pride. You develop friendships and relationships. It's hard. Pride, Freemasonry fills you with this idea of pride, for its titles and its degrees, its regalia and its collars and all these things. It's hard, but is Jesus not enough for you? If he is, then leave Freemasonry, because it is not of him. But if Jesus if he's not enough for you, then why not? Thank you.